How's it going, my evil residents? Today we're going to be comparing two franchises that I love very, very much. We're going to be comparing Resident Evil, of course, that is the main topic of the channel, to the hit series starring Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. It'll be fun and epic, and both of these franchises actually have a lot more in common than you might think at first glance. And yeah, we're just going to go over that today, maybe put you on some new games to play. If you haven't tried Tomb Raider, I highly recommend them. Any of them, honestly, except for a couple, but we will get there. Yeah, let's just get right into it. Starting out, both games released in 1996, Tomb Raider the original and Resident Evil 1. They're both puzzle-based, exploration-type games that both innovated a big genre, the adventure-style game and the survival horror-type game. But they're both, at their core, puzzle games with combat elements, except one has a horror lean to it in a smaller environment, and the other is big globe-trotting adventure, kind of like Indiana Jones. As far as mechanics go, they do have pretty similar controls, but I would say that you're swapping, for Tomb Raider, you're swapping parkour skills and more maze-like environments with inventory management in Resident Evil. I'd say they kind of fill the same part of the role as like a third pillar of gameplay. It's like trying to find where you need to go, and puzzle solving, and then inventory management / parkour. And then obviously both have enemies to kill. Both do have boss fights, of course. Can't have a PS1 game without a boss fight. But yeah, that is the main bones of the game, is light combat elements with boss fights that are very cool and have big animals, parkour / inventory management, depending which game you're talking about, and then puzzle solving. They're very similar. Two of those things are literally the same thing. And then they have similar controls as well, aside from not parkour. The way these two games innovated is kind of oddly the exact opposite. It's kind of hilarious. Tomb Raider, what they did to keep their, to be able to make such vast, explorable levels, was they made like a grid building system to kind of be able to map out the maps easily and apply textures to them to make them look nice and easy to create efficiently and still look nice. So when you're playing through these games and everything looks like it's made out of cubes, that's because everything is made out of cubes. It's pretty interesting, and it's kind of interesting to see the ways they hide it or don't hide it in some cases. Like those pushy doors that are in the original games that are literally just cubes. It's really funny sometimes. But both games do use their design elements very well. Resident Evil opted for using high-fidelity backgrounds with 3D model characters placed over them to walk around over the backgrounds to kind of trick you into thinking that it was a higher resolution game than it actually was, and it worked. The game, to this day, honestly still looks pretty great. Obviously dated. Both of these games are obviously dated, but they do both still look very good in their own ways. And last but not least, they both got some good ass music. Okay, they just got some good music. The franchises do follow the same path. Tomb Raider 2 in 97 and Resident Evil 2 in 98. Both get more action-oriented and have a little bit of a new tone shift because of that. Tomb Raider 2 and Resident Evil 2 doubled down on the action. Tomb Raider leaned into it much more than Resident Evil 2 did, but I think that worked for Tomb Raider to some extent more than Resident Evil. Tomb Raider 2 opted to focus more on Lara. The whole series focuses on Lara Croft, basically. There's not a Tomb Raider game where you don't play as Lara Croft, whereas Resident Evil opted to kind of widen its scope of characters and start on creating its whole wide cast that it has today, and never having the same character be in the same two games in a row besides Ethan, for some reason. Their main selling points for these games, Tomb Raiders, was the vehicles. It added vehicles, and they actually weren't too horribly jank. They were just only slightly jank, which was actually awesome. And this is pre-Halo, okay? You don't have the buttery, smooth, beautiful, warms your heart Warthog to come back to and do donuts on Avalanche with, okay? You don't have that. So this was one of the first games that lets you actively get on and off your vehicles to let you roam around the world. And back in the day, that was mind-blowing. Oh my god. it was the same type of mind-blowing as seeing your reflection actively update in like a game with ray tracing. It's kind of a similar type of thing, just a similar like, whoa, future gaming right here. And it was really cool. And then RE2's innovative feature that it added that a lot of people really like and make it notable is its zapping system, where you can, like, there's one part where you open up the locker, it's like, do you want to take the machine gun or do you want to take the side pack? Whichever one you don't take is available in the other scenario. So if you're Leon, you grab the side pack, Claire will have the machine gun, stuff like that. And that was just really cool, and it made each playthrough that you do of the game different, because it's like, oh, this time I'm gonna grab the side pack for Leon instead of the machine gun or whatever. And it made the game pretty much endlessly replayable, because you had different stuff every playthrough, and you could decide on replaythroughs like, oh, this was really OP for this, or really need this for Leon, I'm gonna save it for Claire, stuff like that. Tomb Raider was not as well received as Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 was pretty much praised across the board. Even the action, people were like, oh, the upped action is awesome, keep it up, we like the Hollywood elements to it. Whereas Tomb Raider was like, oh, this is a little bit too violent. I liked exploring tombs in awkward silence. That was much more fun than gunning down legions of men. But yeah, Tomb Raider 2 overall just wasn't seen as innovative as Resident Evil 2. But both games did get a sequel in Resident Evil 3 that was made by a different team, different developers, both still the same company, but just different group of developers. These games were side games that were just upgraded to be the third entry, so that's why both of these games are kind of like vaguely related to the other two story-wise, but still not really continuing anything. They just kind of stagnate the story. The main difference here is that Tomb Raider 3 was made to just sell more copies and keep the franchise relevant while other games were being made, whereas Resident Evil 3 was made in an attempt to expand the franchise, have multiple devs work on a vast franchise of games. And it wasn't made as much from a, we need to pump this franchise out now before it dies type of thing. It was more of just like a, we want to expand this franchise out and have multiple games with multiple different tones. So they kind of took different approaches to that, but these two games still end up being being pretty weird in the whole story as far as things fit in. Both of these games are higher fidelity and add new stuff. Tomb Raider adds different climbing and parkour mechanics. Resident Evil 3 adds ammo crafting and like a choice system where it's like you can save Brad, you can leave Brad to die, just stuff like that. Yeah, these games, honestly, as much as I like Resident Evil 3, don't get me wrong, they don't move anything forward as far as both franchises are concerned. I would say that Resident Evil 3 does have more staying power with the overall series, with how over-encompassing stalker enemies have become in Resident Evil. Like, every Resident Evil game now has one since Resident Evil 2 Remake, I believe? Yeah, Resident Evil 2 Remake. Every Resident Evil game's had one, whereas nothing from Tomb Raider 3, you could technically say, like, scooting in small spaces stuck around, but that's not like a big selling feature. That's just a new parkour option. That's like not a selling point. They just put on the back of the box, can now scoot through small spaces. No, nobody's buying that. No, nobody's buying a game because they can scoot through small spaces. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, moving on to the real continuations of the stories. Code Veronica, Resident Evil Code Veronica in 2000 to Tomb Raider Last Revelation in 1999. These were, as I said, intended to be the real third games of the franchise made by original devs. Both games were much more character and story focused, but the main difference here is Code Veronica was meant to be a jumping off point to continue a main story thread from, whereas Tomb Raider 4 was actually meant to end the series because the devs didn't want to work on these games anymore. So they kind of secretly half killed off Laura at the end of Tomb Raider 4. Spoiler alert for this 25-year-old game. Sorry. One thing I want to note for Last Revelation, they added the key item combine feature and weapon attachment combining feature from Resident Evil. But they did it really shit, and it's really confusing in the story because there's just some parts of the story where it's not clear that you have to combine certain items to progress. I can't remember any examples off the top of my head, but if you've played this game, you know, or if you've like heard someone play this game, it's probably the first thing they complained about is that they were stumped for like, I can't remember exactly what it was. It involved a crowbar, and you had to like pry something off, but you couldn't just pry it off. You had to like combine it with something else. It was a pain in the ass. It made no sense. Okay. Another main difference here is that with the story focus, Code Veronica's story was well liked. People did like it. Last Revelation, people did not like the story. They were like, why did you kill off Lara Croft, my beloved, my favorite person on my PlayStation? Why did you do that? It's just very different responses for very similar goal games. Loyal controls, loyal gameplay, big focus on story, didn't land super well. Right here, we're going to take a little bit of a side tangent to talk about what Tomb Raider was doing. And I would say this stuff in this area had kind of a similar, I want to say, effect on the franchise as Resident Evil 6 did, but also not really. Not as much this first game, Tomb Raider Chronicles. This game I would compare most close to the Revelations games that would come later. Chronicles, the game is just a series of flashbacks of Lara's life before Tomb Raider 1, and it's interesting. It's kind of boring and very linear. I'd say the Revelations games executed this sort of concept of being flashbacks to previous parts in the timeline, where Revelations took place before 5 and had its own story and everything. Say what you want about that story. I don't like most of the side characters in that game, except for Parker. Parker, my beloved. This game just, it doesn't land as well as those games do. It's still fun if you like Tomb Raider, but if you haven't played Tomb Raider, I'm not going to recommend you this one in any sort of way. Now, Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. Oh my god. This game was so broken. This was the first Tomb Raider game I ever played. This was the first Tomb Raider game I played. And then I complained about it so much to my dad. I was like, Dad, why did you want me to play this game? This game sucks so bad. It's not fun. Can I please go play MX vs. ATV Off-Road Fury? Please, I don't like this game. And he's like, no. Let me go find my disc of the original of Tomb Raider 2. He put that in, I was like, oh my god, this game's so much better. Yeah, this game was just notoriously broken, and it definitely softened a lot of people's love for the franchise because it was still canon. It kind of did weird things with the story, and it sort of copied Resident Evil with having like mutant zombie enemies and some fixed camera segments. This game does feel a little bit like Code Veronica, but set in like a city. It's really weird. This game is... Angel of Darkness is so weird. I don't recommend this game at all. It barely works. It's not fun. Just skip this one, okay? Just skip it. Now we move on to the action-oriented linear soft reboot with simpler puzzles that alienated the oldest fans of the franchise, but drew in a large new group of fans. And, yeah. Am I talking about Tomb Raider Legend, or am I talking about Resident Evil 4? Which one am I talking about? Because they both do the same thing. I'd argue RE4 was the more innovative one of the two because it literally invented the over-the-shoulder camera system that most games use now over the character in the center of the screen third-person camera that Tomb Raider had before. Even Tomb Raider would use this camera later, okay? So it's RE4 just blows Tomb Raider Legend out of the water as far as innovative goes, okay? That said, Tomb Raider Legend was very well received and very well liked. It kind of revamped the action aspect of the game, kind of gave it a Max Payne juice up with some slow-mo mechanics and really satisfying gunplay. They wouldn't really innovate on this too much as it goes on. It does get really dry because they don't add too much to it, but it is really fun and it works really well with what they were doing as an action game. The next one to release as far as the Tomb Raider timeline goes is Tomb Raider Anniversary, which is a remake of Tomb Raider 1. And we're going to compare this to Resident Evil 1 that released for the GameCube in 2002, that remake, because they're the most direct comparisons even though they released quite a wide ways apart. Now, Resident Evil 1 2002 is a ground-up remake and a new engine that reworked a little bit of the story but was still very faithful and meant to replace it in the canon that was honestly very necessary because the old game is very dated and doesn't play super well. Just play Resident Evil 1 2002. It is a wholly better game, better graphics, better writing, better voice acting, and the voice acting is still kind of weird, but it works for the game. And it's an insanely fun game. And Tomb Raider Anniversary is the same way, except the combat in this game is the combat from Tomb Raider Legend. Now, this would be like if they made an RE1 remake in the style of RE4. So basically the Lost in Nightmares DLC of Resident Evil 5. That's what Tomb Raider Anniversary is to the original Resident Evil, okay? If you kind of want to feel the comparison here, I guess the most apt comparison is actually Tomb Raider Anniversary 2 Resident Evil 5 Lost in Nightmares. Wow, I didn't think about that. That's not even in my script. I should have scripted it around that, but oh well. Tomb Raider Anniversary did feel more outdated for when it came out than Resident Evil Remake did. As a result of it keeping its newer things, it felt that more like a reimagining than a remake, but it was still labeled as a remake. So it just it didn't land as well as Resident Evil Remake did, but it was still very well received because it was still a fun and good game. I really like this game. I just want to get that out there. This is probably my favorite of this like trilogy that they had going on here. Tomb Raider Legend, Anniversary, then Underworld. This is my favorite one of the three, I think. Yeah, just good game. Now, moving on to Tomb Raider Underworld and Resident Evil 5. These are the games that took their action too far and over the top and had a very convoluted story and kind of had a, you know, they just took things a little bit too far, but sold pretty well. So the franchise kept on chugging. Now, I would say overall, between both of these games are good games. I want to stress that. Both of these games are very good games. Tomb Raider Underworld does the same thing that Resident Evil 5 does, with just going way too over the top. It's way too much sometimes. It hits Resident Evil 6 levels of over the top, whereas Resident Evil 5 doesn't quite do that, I don't think. Whichever one you find more ridiculous between Lara Croft battling zombies with Thor's hammer versus Chris Redfield punching a boulder in a volcano. I think those two things just kind of sum up where these franchises have gone. Raiding tombs to fighting zombies with Thor's hammer. Surviving zombies in a old decrepit mansion to punching a boulder in a volcano. The franchises have taken this very action-y just pipeline down to just sell more copies and become more interesting and sell more as the games have gone on. I just think it's really fascinating that they both end up in these points a year apart after releasing in the same year. It's insane how similar the trajectory of these franchises have gone. It's wild. Now, after this, there was the weird spin-off game that only hardcore fans enjoy. You will not catch someone just being like, oh, yeah, I like that one Resident Evil game. It's the only Resident Evil game I played. I had it. It's Darkside Chronicles. Yeah, it's a cool game. I had it when I was a kid. Nobody's saying that, okay? Only hardcore fans have this game. It's the same thing with Lara Croft Guardian of Light. It's a top-down Diablo-style shooter game, but it has a lot of puzzles, like a lot of puzzles. Like as many puzzles as the original Tomb Raiders. It's honestly more similar to the original Tomb Raider games than we've had since Tomb Raider Legend, which is kind of crazy. And it's a top-down game. If you're looking to scratch your Tomb Raider itch, in this middle section, you play this game. Not the actual Tomb Raider games. Which kind of, I think that is emblematic of where the franchise is kind of at. It doesn't know what to do with itself. It's very separated from what it originally was. It's not quite hitting the same, and they needed to do a refresh. Now, Resident Evil wouldn't get to that until RE6. Now, there's no direct comparison to RE6 in the Tomb Raider lineage of games because there wasn't really a game released in this window that fits with this one. We will get to Tomb Raider 2013 in a second. RE6 just does something that no other game has really done. It's sold incredibly well. It has a hardcore gripping fan base, but also somehow nearly killed a franchise. It's insane. This game is such an anomaly. I know there's tons of video essays on this game, but I need to make a video on this game eventually. There's just too much to dive into on why this game tanked Resident Evil while still being one of the best-selling Resident Evil games, and still being a good game, but also like a bad game. I need to make my own video about it. I will eventually. Not today. We're talking about Tomb Raider right now. Tomb Raider. We will now move on to the full reboot versus the basically full reboot, but is still canon, and that would be Tomb Raider 2013 versus Resident Evil 7, where both games star you being kidnapped and brutally tortured by locals, with new elements from semi-modern franchises that are very loved. Both are more grounded and gritty and have very excellent stories, and both also copy their superiors that were meant to harken back to them, which is kind of insane. Resident Evil 7 is very clearly taking some notes from the PT demo that was stolen from us, that was taken out of our grubby little horror-loving hands. I will never forgive them. And Tomb Raider 2013 took after Uncharted with some of its climbing mechanics, its gunplay and stuff like that. It's like if Uncharted and Far Cry had a child. That's what this Tomb Raider reboot is. And then you also added Dark Souls bonfires. that's what Tomb Raider 2013 is. But that sounds cool to you. I personally don't like these games that much, just because every time I'm playing them, I'm sitting there like, I'd rather play Uncharted. I'd rather be playing Uncharted right now. I just want to play Uncharted. Or I'll be saying, I want to play Far Cry 3 right now. Only Far Cry 3, none of the other ones. I just want to play Far Cry 3. Or I want to get... It's just... I don't know. A lot of people love these reboots and think they're great. They do a lot of great stuff to make Lara Croft a more fleshed out, great character. But they just don't hit the same as the old Tomb Raider games. I don't think so, at least. Whereas Resident Evil 7 is what really made me get back into the franchise after really liking RE5, especially, is what mainly got me into the franchise. Yeah, throw your tomatoes, whatever. But going back, I still appreciate Resident Evil 3 and stuff, and I appreciate Resident Evil 5, I appreciate Resident Evil 7. Whereas with Tomb Raider, it's like, I love the classic games. The middle games, I'm like, these are still fun. This game, I'm like, this is cool, but it's not really Tomb Raider. Just because you say Tomb Raided on the side missions doesn't mean it feels like a Tomb Raider game, okay? Yeah, these games were seen as very excellent reboots. One much more faithful than the other, that took different vibes from different popular things and just kind of melded it into itself and became much better for it. Moving on, these are the last two games we're going to talk about, technically. Not really. They're not the last two games we'll talk about. I don't know why I said that. Rise of the Tomb Raider versus RE8, the sequel in a snowy setting that expanded on crafting. Yes, both of these games do this. I'm aware Rise of the Tomb Raider also takes place in the Sahara Desert. They sell you on the snowy setting, okay? I also want to point out, since I don't have much to say about these two games, both of the reboots just feature their main character getting their ass handed to them. It's kind of hilarious. Like, Ethan's always getting his hand chopped off, he's always getting thrown off of things, getting stabbed and stuff like that. Laura's having so much. How is Lara Croft alive in the reboots? How is she alive? There's no way. She should have died. Like halfway through the first Tomb Raider reboot, 2013. Just the main thing about these two games is that fans debate over which of the two is better a lot, and I've noticed it usually just comes down to preference, and they don't want to say that, but it comes down to preference, buddy. Let the other person like the other game. It's okay. Or people only like these two games and don't like the other game. Those are like the only two camps of people as far as these games go. It's kind of weird, unless you're like fans of the whole franchise. And yeah, that's as far as I'm gonna go with the Tomb Raider reboot trilogy. I'm aware Shadow of the Tomb Raider is out, but Resident Evil 9 is not out, so there's nothing to directly compare it to. And then I also haven't played it, so, and I'm not buying a $60 game to make this video because I'm poor. So we're just gonna skip right to talking about what inspired me to make this video: Tomb Raider trilogy. I didn't even know this game was coming out until I saw an ad on the front page of my Xbox. It was like, Tomb Raider Trilogy out now or some shit like that. And I couldn't screenshot it because Xbox doesn't let you screenshot your dashboard. Xbox, let me screenshot my dashboard, okay? Sometimes your ads are funny and I want to show them to my friends and be like, why is this on my homepage? Let me screenshot that anyway. I saw this ad, I'm like, no way is this out. There's no way. So, and I didn't think about buying it immediately because I was like, oh, I have Tomb Raider Legend already. I don't need that. I'm good. I can emulate the other Tomb Raider games on my laptop. I'm gonna skip this. But then I saw on TikTok, yes, throw your tomatoes, someone doing the Tomb Raider 2 get on the roof of the mansion glitch with the revamped graphics, and I bought it immediately. I closed TikTok and I went and bought it. I could tell just from that glitch being done with the classic music playing, with the revamped graphics, that they put a lot of love into this remake, and I was like, oh my goodness, I want this so bad for Resident Evil. Oh, it kind of made me sad a little bit. Like, I love the Tomb Raider trilogy remakes. They're incredible. I can't recommend them to you enough. If you haven't played Tomb Raider before, fuck the reboots, play this one. You will like them more. At least I think. Unless you really like Far Cry. Then go play Far Cry. But no, just play these. Play these. They're incredible. If you can deal with Resident Evil remake controls, you can deal with the controls in this. They're basically the same controls. Okay? I can't stress enough how rabid people would go for a re-release of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, the classic ones, with the fixed cameras, with revamped graphics like this. Oh my god, people would lose their minds. Capcom won't do it And that's why I'm going to compare these directly to the Resident Evil remakes, okay? Now, Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes are not faithful rebuilds of what they were before. They are reimaginings based on the originals that in some cases are almost completely different. Resident Evil 2 Remake, amazing game. I love that game with my entire being. Technically, it's not a good remake. It changes a lot of things about the original. The most notable feature about the original is the items app system is literally just not in the game. There's lots of segments that are in the original that are not in this game. Lots of designs are completely different. They're reimaginings. They are not technically remakes. That's my main thing about them. I like them, but they are not remakes. I don't know why they're really called remakes. I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Resident Evil 3, you all know. Okay, you all know Resident Evil 3. I'm not gonna go there. And I'd say the closest to like a faithful remake is Resident Evil 4 remake. But that still changes a lot of stuff. It adds a crafting element. It adds all the knife mechanics. It feels very different from its original, but also feels very similar. I'd say it's the best of the remakes as far as a remake goes. And it cuts the least amount of content. That's the main thing. It cuts the least amount of stuff out. It's the least embarrassed to be the original of all these remakes. And that's just something I want to highlight. I want to highlight the fact that we're getting these awesome Resident Evil remakes that are great games, but they do not replace their originals and should not be seen as such. The originals, unless you have a PC or a PlayStation, so basically if you have an Xbox, you can't play them. Okay? It's literally impossible to play the originals on like modern hardware. It's really hard to get them running. On PC, to play the originals, you have to engage in some Sea of Thieves gameplay, is all I'm going to say. You have to engage in some Assassin's Creed Black Flag gameplay to play them, and yeah, that's that. The only, let's say legal way to play them is on PlayStation, and I think that sucks. It should not be that hard to just play an old game that a company makes no money on. They could put some effort, like Tomb Raider Trilogy, into revamping the textures on those games. Just re-release them as a package. Resident Evil Trilogy. Almost like the naming conventions right there. That's the main thing I want to highlight with this. These games have such a similar legacy, and a great legacy, honestly. Most of the games for both of these are incredible, but where we are at with the remakes of these franchises is so different. While I love the new Resident Evil remakes, they revamp my love for the franchise, they are erasing the original games that a lot of people grew up and loved with, and those original games should still be playable, like how Tomb Raider is doing. I want to stress, please go play Tomb Raider Trilogy if you haven't, and if you have a computer that can play a PlayStation emulator, which most of you should, go play those games. There's plenty of tutorials out there. Please go play the original Resident Evil games if you haven't. I just want to leave off on that note. It's hard to find old games to play. You either pay an exorbitant amount of money, have to engage in some Assassin's Creed Black Flag gameplay, or have to have a console with really, really good backwards compatibility that have selectively different libraries, or it costs monthly to play a game that is literally dirt cheap and you could run on a TI-84 calculator Nintendo. What are you doing? That's what I want to leave you with this video. Two great franchises that have had their ups and downs, that have had issues with keeping their games on modern hardware, and you should go play their original games. If you like their new games, it's healthy for you to see where your favorite franchises come from, and it's healthy for these companies' pockets because they get to sell you something that they already sold you many years ago but slightly better, and you will still play it, and I will still probably recommend it to people. That's what I want to leave you off with in this video. If you like the comparison of the overall franchises, please do leave a like and subscribe. I might do this with other franchises, comparing to them to Resident Evil, but I can't really think of any off the top of my head that I would want to compare. If you have any ideas, please feel free to leave them in the comments, or if you want to just share your thoughts about anything, comments appreciated, and increases engagement. It's awesome. If you like this channel and you're tired of my horrible microphone audio quality, become a member. All the money I get from this channel just goes right back into the channel, and first thing on my shopping list is a new microphone, so please become a member. Obviously, if you don't become a member, I still appreciate your view, your like, your subscribe, even your dislikes. I just appreciate you interacting with the video. It's honestly been really nice seeing the response to this channel so far. And yeah, every single one of you that has subscribed, liked the video, even if you've glanced at my thumbnail and thought, that's a nice thumbnail, I appreciate you. I appreciate you until the end of time, and I will cook you up a nice Jill sandwich with a side of fries. That is going to do it for this video, and yeah, stay evil, my residents.